Good morning, everyone. Thank you and welcome back to the second session of our 25th Symposium profile. While our panelists get ready, I just wanted to remind you of some aspects of the profile journal. Remember that it was created in 1999. Its areas are related to applied linguistics and education. It has a semi-annual publication, 2 issues per year in January and July. It is an open access journal with all content freely available online for reading or downloading. The journal accepts manuscripts written in English that report studies concerning teaching and learning of English as a second or foreign language. Studies can have qualitative or mixed orientation, including research approaches such as action research, narrative inquiry, discourse analysis, case studies, among others. There is also a section for articles of reflections and for literature reviews around the same topic. And the journal is indexed by Scopus and included in Shimago Journal Ranking. According to the most recent report, the journal ranks in quartile 1 for linguistics and language, in quartile 3 for education. So now we're going to start with our third panel, which is called Classroom-Based Research, Challenges and Possibilities for Teachers to Incorporate Research in Our Practice. The moderator for this panel is Professor Edgar Lucero from Universidad de La Salle. Professor Edgar Lucero is a full-time teacher educator in the Education Sciences faculty at Universidad de La Salle, Bogotá, Colombia. He is the editor of How Journal of ASOCOPY, the Colombian Association of Teachers of English. He holds a PhD in education with an emphasis on ELT and an MA in applied linguistics to TOEFL from Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas from Bogotá. He also holds a specialization degree in didactics of languages and a BA in Spanish, English, and French. His research interests are in classroom interaction, language, teaching didactics, and teaching practice. Now, Professor Lucero is going to introduce the panelists for this session.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. So I have the pleasure to present the panelists for this event. So first, I'm going to introduce Liliana Cuesta. She's an associate professor at Universidad de La Sabana, Chía, Colombia. She's the director of the Outreach of Engagement of the School of Communication at the same university. She holds a PhD in English Philology from Universidad Nacional de Educación a Distancia, UNED, Madrid, Spain. Her research areas include, but not restrict to, computer-assisted language learning, teacher education, online education, content and language integrated learning, and intercultural and international education. So, Liana, welcome. Let me introduce Paula Golombek. She's clinical professor in the Department of Linguistics at the University of Florida, where she developed the undergraduate certificate in teaching English as a second language program. One of her primary responsibilities in the program is to mentor novice teachers in the practicum, the context in which she tries to apply and research Vygotskian's sociocultural theory to language teacher development in practice. Her research interests include teacher development in second language teacher education, including the functional role of teacher emotions, how language and concepts mediate teacher development as they think together, and language teacher narrative inquiry as professional development. Paula has published numerous articles on EL2 teacher development and has a long-standing commitment to language teacher development in Colombia and Mexico. Yeah, so welcome, Paula. Let me introduce Rosa Alejandra Medina. Teaches in the Foreign Languages Department at Universidad Nacional de Colombia. She has a PhD in Education, Language, Literacy, and Culture from the University of Massachusetts. Her research looks into how language teachers in Colombia harness multilingual, multimodal, and digital resources for teaching and learning. So, welcome, Rosa. And let me just last but not least, Javier Sierra. Javier, he is a professor at Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas, Bogotá, in the Faculty of Science and Education. He teaches in the bachelor's program in foreign languages and the master's program in applied linguistics. The Professor Sierra is also a member of the S2 Poly research group. His research focuses on gender and power relations, teacher subjectivities, discourse analysis, and post-structuralism. So, Javier, welcome. Okay, for this panel, we're going to deal with 3, 4 questions approximately. When I just ask the question, you have approximately 3 minutes each one for the answer. Okay? First question deals with the research and practicum dimension. And we know that in this specific context, practicum is always there, and student teachers, pre-service teachers, and teachers, they concentrate on practice, on how to do the teaching practices, following strategies and implementing methodologies and approaches. But the research is just a new component that has been in part just that is part of our profession. The question is, how can teachers incorporate research into the practical? I would to start with, I guess that from the left to the right. So Liliana.
Thank you, Edgar. Very nice to see you. And thank you very much for the audience to be on a Saturday morning, very early, supporting Profile as usual, and to my friend and best colleague, Melvita, and to Universidad Nacional, naturally, for the invitation. Well, we all know that research is a trajectory, right? It never ends, never stops. And I think that a good way, since the panel is about how to motivate and how to sustain teachers' attention and motivate them to boost their research interests, I would say there are many ways to do it. On the one hand, we would say, or I would say, finding value in our daily practice and trying to see at all the time, valuing what we do, valuing what we could research in the same classroom, and transmitting and taking this and extrapolate it to be investigated. Our classrooms are constant laboratories of ideas, and sometimes teachers are not aware. I would hate to make generalizations, but sometimes when we are in teacher training programs, we believe or we witness that some teachers either lack the capacity or either lack the awareness or either lack the motivation to realize that classrooms are our center of ideas. So one thing is to raise awareness on teachers and how we could help them to move along their trajectories in research and how to boost not only their motivation, but I know that there is another question about a specific strategy, so I would not jump to that. But on the one hand, I guess that in this learning trajectory towards research, all of us, I mean, not only the teacher has the responsibility, the teacher should be supported to be moved along this continuum and have the possibility to sit down, analyze, evaluate what he or she has in the classroom and see how is that we could, nurture new connections over there. Another way to boost teachers' motivation, apart from help him or her finding this trajectory road in research and motivation and all of that, is finding merit in working with colleagues. I guess that we are still, I mean, we have improved. I mean, this is both a critique, but also a self-introspection and self-analysis to the system. I guess that we are a little bit better in collaboration with colleagues, but we are still lacking the possibility to nurture more connections with teachers from within our context and within our country and within other local or regional networks. I guess that one of the things that we would, or that contributes to help teachers move along this continuum, as I say, I use the metaphor of learning trajectory to move aside my points, is precisely help them collaborate with colleagues. Um, I guess that we are no longer on an ego moment as in the past, right? In the past, a lot of teachers would say or had said, oh no, I rather concentrate on this individually. I am not prone to collaborate with my colleagues. But I guess that with the impact of technologies, if the pandemic left us something or anything positive, many things were positive to my view, was that the possibility of establishing connections, not only at the regional and local level, but also transnational. So just to end that point, I guess that these two would be macro structures or macro strategies. I know that we would, as I said, discuss a little bit further on other strategies, but I guess that teachers should find the value in what we do. We all do a lot of things in the classroom, and hardly ever most teachers are conscious that research can start from within, daily, daily, on daily activities, on daily practices. And well, we, by all means, we want motivated teachers, but also happy teachers, both in practice and in research.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. I was thinking, or I was reflecting during like 2 weeks about this question, and for me it was very interesting to observe that there's probably quite difficult to separate the research area from the teaching practices. So we have seen in a lot of ways, probably not in a systematic way, what teachers are doing in classrooms. So I think that in two levels, that questions. The first one was related to like practices, micro practices from the teachers when they are actually doing research, but we don't know now, right? That's one of the key issues that we have. That when you get to see some classrooms and you see amazing things that are done by teachers and not done actually by the students, right? In terms of research. So um, probably the question or what I was remembering about how can we incorporate teacher or research dimension into teaching, um, for me is like a blurry line, no? So it's very difficult to define when a research end and a teacher starts, right? So because we are always time reflecting on practice, and I think that that's the key issue of research. Probably we take into account inquiry-based learning when we are working with projects, probably small case projects, depending on contextualized learning, right? Because probably the demands of a specific context are not the same from the ones that are required in a different one. So um, in my perspective, I think that it's quite difficult to separate it. Also, and something that is very important, and not to forget that the place that we are at, Universidad Nacional and action research, the importance of participatory action research and where the place where it was supposed to be born, right? So we need to see and to take into account the origin of those places, right? Um, probably when we see some problematic situations that we have, where I come from, the university, we usually tend to have like context-based pedagogies or place-based pedagogies that also value the environment, okay? Not only taking into account top-down perspectives, but also embracing our own, right? And to take into account all those challenges that we may have. So probably we may have some time constraints, we have time, resource limitations, as Professor was mentioning. Our teachers in Colombia, particularly, we have a workload that is very heavy. So sometimes research is seen as extra work, right? But once you change the lenses a little bit, you take into account that teachers are researchers all of the time, but because of this formality that research tends to have, like it becomes like an extra step. So probably I would think that maybe is to change the lenses to take into account research not as a big word like capital letters, but maybe research as a way to understand a phenomena, right? And even a phenomena that can be born in the house itself from the students, no? So it's not something that has to be, I don't know, groundbreaking and change the world and stuff like that.
When I first got this question, I understood how can we encourage teachers to do research. But the way this was phrased, it was how can we encourage in teacher education? That's a different question. So I've been sitting here thinking very hard. The steam may have been coming out of my brain. And well, I have three ideas basically. I mean, I think first of all, we often present teachers in our teacher education program with research that we have done or people like us have done. And that's good in a lot of ways, but I think we also need to provide research, teacher research to them. We need to share examples of teacher research with them, especially if we think about the most common issues that novice teachers face. Having teachers talk to teachers, I think, is really fundamental to seeing the value of research rather than us trying to convince them. So that would be my first point. My second point would be that I think as teacher educators, we can engage teachers, our students as teachers, in research together. So I can kind of think about questions, they can think about questions, we can address questions. Maybe there's a couple questions that we're researching together. And again, this idea of collaboration is essential. That teachers have to do research, I think, with other teachers to have this be really meaningful and to face that hurdle of doing research. And so I think we can do it with them in different settings. And then finally, I'll go back to my talk yesterday. I mean, this is a perfect example. This is an example for somebody to do themselves as praxis-based research. And you could think of the question, how do I incorporate a research component in my language teacher education program? And I think that's a really compelling question. And again, if you think about praxis-based research, you can theorize what you might do, how you might do it, and include learners in this process and chronicle what you've done, see what's working, what's not working. That would be a really interesting research article to write with the teachers who participated with you. And then once you have those, the experience of that implementation of that, you can again go back through that reflexive cycle of theory and practice and think about what worked, what didn't work, what you would change. And really, I think this is a wonderful way for praxis-based education. And actually, finally, I do have a fourth point is we used to have at Penn State at the end of the MA TESOL program a research sharing. And so the teachers would engage in research. I think Karen Johnson and I did an article on this a couple years back in Profile, where teachers chronicle their own development over the course of their teacher education program. So I think having teachers thinking about looking at their own development as research is really another way to do this. So I went over my 3 minutes.
Okay, I think it's my turn. So it's the most difficult part because I'm going to be kind of a summarizer of everybody's ideas. So the question that I'm going to be answering is the question about how can teachers incorporate the research dimension into their practice. So as a person with some background with working with teachers, what I did was I was asking one of my teacher friends. So this is Martin. Martin works at a school, at a public school in the south of Bogota. And when I asked him this question, he says, I'm pretty sure we all incorporate or do some research in our classrooms. So my initial perspective was like, okay, this question entails some lack of, or it might not be sufficient what we do to integrate research and teaching practice. But he said like, hey, we all do it. The fact that it's not written or not or unknown by academic audiences doesn't mean that is a non-existent. So teachers do research every day in their practice, similar to what Javier said. The problem here is that perhaps it's not visible. But as Javier said here, teaching and researching are intertwined. Okay, so that is my first point. And the second point, when I was thinking about this question, was why teachers might or might not incorporate research in this practice, and I was looking for answers, and I found the answer on the walls of the glorious Universidad Nacional de Colombia with this wonderful graffiti that says, "A tu teoría le falta calle." So this implies that the first possible reason why teachers might not include this classroom-based research is because it's not relevant for the realities. I have conversations with teachers and they say like, ¿para qué me sirve esto acá? So what? And in my own research, I also found that imported research methods and concepts might not be relevant for the needs of local classrooms. So on my dissertation on translanguaging and multimodality, I was doing my lit review, and most studies talked very well about including multimodality, but they were developed in global north countries with situations of equal access. When I talked to Martin, he told me, hey, I don't even have a TV I mean, I have like some worksheets and 45 students and myself. So I think that following Professor Golombek's ideas, there it might be a possible solution for this, and it's prioritizing teacher-driven research that addresses the needs and the contextual constraints. These may or not coincide with the university-based researchers' interests and the trendy topics that we have in the global literature. But from a Fourier perspective, if we understand it as praxis, it would be, I think, more relevant and useful for teachers, in which they have like this praxis cycle of reflection, action, and theory as a cycle. And my second reason, because we don't have time, and I'm gonna be I'm gonna be here summarizing Liliana's ideas about teachers' motivation. So a second reason why we see that teachers might or might not include this classroom-based research in their practice is because we are not thinking about the big picture. So we might not think of teachers when we think about classroom-based research, we only think about teachers and their learners, but we need to think about the larger assemblage here. So this is from my dissertation, but we need to make changes in the entire assemblage. So from stakeholders in institutions that should give teachers time and resources to learn about possible solutions, and involving other actors such as stakeholders, teacher education programs in inquiry and experimentation. This has to be like a space, or we need to think about more in a more ecological perspective to create this terrain, this soil where this integration can happen. In my friends, in my teacher friends' words, he said, look, we need time and hopefully money. Teachers can do amazing things when they're given the resources. And I'm gonna leave it like there. And yeah.
Thank you so much. I would just go back to this just a little bit. That reminds me of a very controversial plenary that we live in Barranquilla in ASOCOPI Congress. But something that struck in the presenters' words was that seems to be that research that is done in the academy does not go directly to teachers at schools, and they feel isolated from that. That struck me so much, and that's something that you probably just deal in your answers, like that connection between teachers, not only teachers in the academy and masters and the universities, undergraduate, masters, and doctoral programs, but also those teachers who are already working at, they still want to do things with us, okay? And cooperation can be just one of the strategies, but if we cooperate all together, I guess that not just at one specific level, I'm talking about not only a doctoral level or a master's level, but we can just go throughout, like going down that hierarchy, and we can investigate with the school teachers. And contextual issues are so relevant, and that is connected to the second question. Second question says, which research approaches are most relevant given contextual challenges? It is said that, or we have perceived in the academy that most of research approaches seems to come from the so-called global north. And there are some approaches that have been created here in our own context, Latin America. Paula knows about Mexico, and we all work on research here in our context. So which are those approaches more relevant according to those contextual challenges that you have already mentioned? Now I'm going to start the other way around, so I want to start first with Rosa.
Okay, thank you. That's a very easy question, and here we have. So for this question, I was wondering, and what we need to ask is who the research is for, what it is for, and what counts as research. We need to go beyond copying and importing research methods and theories. We could advocate for a space that combines both global and local developments. And again, as I mentioned before, teacher-driven approaches that involve classroom-based research for and with teachers, not classroom-based research on teachers or of teachers. So if we take into account this consideration here, we have some examples of what I call critical methodologies or participatory methodologies that may be useful in education. So as Javier had mentioned before, participatory action research by our own Paz-Borda. And in this kind of research, the research questions and issues arise from participants rather than being imposed by external researchers. Teachers can get involved at different stages of the research project according to their time and availability and resources. Some teachers like writing, other teachers like contributing with interviews or with posing questions or with finding literature. Similarly, we have collaborative research where and self-study and these collaborative autoethnographies where teachers, similar to what Professor Golombek has mentioned on her study, where teachers are authors and reflect on their own trajectories, positionalities, and their own experiences. And the last one that I want to mention is participatory visual and digital methods. So what a classroom looks like today is very different from what it looked in the past. We cannot avoid the digital turn, and I think that we can use technology creatively for research. And finally, from sociology, we have critical ethnography, and from communication studies, we have performance ethnography. So these are alternative ways in which I have seen teachers done that, in which they write poetry or use video essay or use art-based research. One professor, Blanca Caldas, she's using theater of the oppressed to simulate cases and situations with teachers and integrate research into the teacher preparation. So these are some ideas. Thank you.
I haven't really heard people talk here so much about practitioner research, which is a sort of large category for all of this. But when I think about practitioner research, I always think about action research, but also exploratory practice. And if you want to talk about the global south taking a role, I think Brazil has taken a major role in terms of exploratory practice. And this idea of working with your students to do research, you're all researchers under an exploratory practice approach. And I think what exploratory practice offers, which also a colleague I have in the College of Education at UF, Nancy Dana, talks about in terms of teacher inquiry, is not framing this as research questions, but as wonderings. I mean, just changing the wording to think of this as wondering so that anything in your classroom could become something that you wonder about. And it's a research that's meaningful to you, and it isn't the big R research, but I think it's a way to make research meaningful for students. And so I think exploratory practice is something perhaps that could be sort of cultivated in a more, I don't know, aggressive manner. I don't want to say aggressive, but you know what I mean. um, Also, lesson study that comes out of Japan, I think, is also such a teacher-oriented way to think about doing research, where a group of teachers work together through a different set of procedures to come up with a lesson, implement it, talk about it, you know, reflect on it together. Again, there's something very um, returning back to practice and what happened and theorizing in that. So I think lesson study also offers a very teacher-focused kind of research. And so I would suggest those two ways as really viable ways to engage teachers in research in their classrooms in ways that capitalize on what you have said about and you've said that we do research all the time. And those wonderings, I think, are kind of what they're thinking about. They're facing something small, and we might think of it more as problem solving, but it's the beginnings of a kind of research that I think is important for teachers. So,
Thank you. When I was thinking of this question, for me, the most difficult part was contextual challenges. Like, I wanted to start there, like, what do we mean by contextual challenges, right? And probably they are different, right? At Savannah, that at Distrital, probably at Florida, we have a lot of contextual challenges. But I was thinking in terms of Colombian, and I would say, well, as Professor mentioned before, we have limited resources. That's like the key that we have, that teachers, they are really eager to do research, but sometimes they don't have the time, they don't have the money to do so. So that's sometimes it's just because we want to do like scratching the surface, trying to get what we want to do, and we do it, right? I mean, teachers do it. Teachers research with what they have. So that is something that probably we need to take into account with action research. But that's small case, no? But then we need to move a little bit backward, and then we need to take into account our diverse population. So maybe with ethnography, that because this is such a big word that we are like, teachers are a little bit scared of working with ethnography studies, right? And taking into account critical pedagogy. So how we take societal inequities. As the beginning was mentioned, my interest is to see in discourse analysis to see how these social asymmetries are reflected through language. You know, that's something that we usually take for granted, that it's only what we do at classroom, but probably not what we say about classroom, right? And that's something that I'm very interested to see. For instance, in Colombia, teachers are usually diminished, right? And English teachers at Columbia are diminished more because we are taking into account what is our level of English. If we are usually segregated based on our level, if it's C2, A1, and that creates like a segregation in our field. So we are always like very competitive in our own field. So that, as Professor Liana was mentioning, it creates difficult things to enhance collaboration. So for me, it's very difficult. So maybe we take into account those narratives by students to see how they tell the stories, how they tell us that story, so we can make sense of what we are doing, not only in terms of local things, but probably considering the global part, the more top-down policies, and analyzing those policies. So how we make sense of this materialization of some ideologies based from some policies in the teacher's life, even in teachers' bodies, no? That we need to take into account as we consider and take into account that. And that leads me to take into account teacher identity, no? That I know that it's very important. We need to see a lot of ways in a lot of contextual to see what is it to be a teacher of English in Colombia here, or maybe in different places that sometimes are deprived from a worthy way of teaching class, right? So that's something that is for me a contextual challenge that we need to take into account. And of course, with a critical eye, I think that it's very difficult not to analyze reality without positioning, as Professor was mentioning, to take into account a pedagogy of the oppressed, to see the people from different lenses. Not only deficit oriented, like this is they don't have this, they are lacking this, they don't have the sufficient level, but considering ways to empower them, but not empower them because we give them the power, but because they have the power. And I think that that's very insightful from research. That would be my answer.
Thank you, Javier. Well, first and foremost, I would say that the Global South is speaking strongly. So I guess that that has opened our eyes and opened the eyes of the world to look at our Global South and seeing as it a universe rich of potential based on what we are living, based on the conditions, based on the universes, ideologies, and multiple scenarios and archetypes that we have here. So I guess that on the one hand, I am very happy to see and well across my trajectory as a teacher, as a researcher, and also as a teacher educator, that we are uh, being considered as a universe which is interesting for the whole world, and we have to believe it, right? Because again, linking it to my first argument in this conversation, sometimes it's a matter, as Javier said, it's a matter of identity, right? It's a matter of not recognizing what we are able to do that. So I wanted to make that claim on the one note. Um, Today, we are living a contemporary era full of challenges, both contextual, from within, from the local, all of these diversities that we have, both in politics, both in our language, education, changing nature in Colombia and Latin America. And we have not to be separate what from the world as well. So my response to this question, or my approach to this question, is more of an integrative nature that combines all of the challenges that we have to emerge and do situated practice research, but with a critical pedagogy and critical orientation lens that allows us to connect what we have locally, we are living locally, towards what we are living globally. So a global approach would be a very interesting way to delve into teacher education scenarios and to help us understand that we are living a situation here in Colombia, but perhaps this situation equates and it's equivalent to similar situations from the global world. And in this awareness raising, interculturally speaking, as I said, and the arguments, and perhaps some of us in the table shared those, addressing concepts of social justice, diversity, equity, in consonance with the sustainable development goals, um, are always matters of interest for teachers. So we need to educate as well ourselves and teachers to see what's happening in the world. That's why my perspective would not only be from within, a bottom-up one. I'd rather, as I said at the beginning, I'd rather advocate for an integrative approach of the two worlds. An integrative view of research with social impact and outreach is highly desirable to my words and to my mind. Um, in a world, as I said, in which with the advent of artificial intelligence and the focus more on motivation theory, right, and health issues, some of these things perhaps for some teachers could be uh, isolated, But if we take all of these elements and examples, for example, and we try to shape and build on motivation theory, we could say that there are many perspectives to address these contextual challenges that our teachers and we ourselves do. So how many times we have struggled with our workload, as Javier was mentioning, how is that we hear every time how to cope up with not only workload but lifestyles in a world that has changed, not only with the advent of technologies and everyday new gadgets and applications are born, but also the change of the world itself, the change of our society. We are no longer the same individuals, naturally. I guess that our approach to uh, the future and the present is different. Perhaps if I remember my university years, long time ago, right? We were not conscious about these things. And I am very happy to see conversations in the classroom with my students, both across levels, from the very young ones at the undergraduate level to my doctoral students, in which we are talking about where is that we are going as a society, right? How conscious are people now about intercultural device and horizons over there. And last but not least, I guess that with all of, and there is my technology focus a little bit, I really think that we need to take into consideration all of the benefits that the latest technologies have to ourselves in the classrooms. And this is no longer a computer assisted language learning approach. I guess that this has already expanded to many other levels. And I guess that we are also in a very good moment to take advantage of what the technology is offering, especially focusing on artificial intelligence matters and developments. And I would say it's a very interesting moment to find the joy of qualitative and quantitative worlds. So as an advocate for mixed methods, now speaking a little bit about the methodology itself, I guess that we are in a very good moment to also train teachers and enjoy how is that technologies are supporting our analysis, how is that the quantitative world that sometimes is far from the discourse in the classrooms and especially in language, how can it assist our practices and our close development of issues, right, in the classroom. So I guess that helping and opening new worlds, it's interesting, effective, and helping teachers to connect that education and academia is in a big ecosystem, right? And a big ecosystem that is permeated by the challenges, the contextual challenges of the different spheres, right? Would be a very good exercise for us and a very compelling mission as well.
Thank you very much for your answers. So thus far we have covered how to incorporate research into teaching practices and now recently the research approaches. For the third question, I want you to picture the following scenario. When we are with our teachers and with our student teachers, pre-service teachers, and we are in professional training as well, they are so much worried about how to teach and those strategies and methodologies about teaching. Seems to be that they don't have the same impetus for research. They don't have that way of, okay, I'm going to struggle just to do my research better. Third question goes towards that particular idea. How can teachers expand their research skills? If you have initiatives or other issues to deal with, provided that teachers have a lot of a lot of work and a lot of study as well. So now I'm going to start with Javier, Paula, Liliana, and Rosa. Javier.
Who comes after me? I don't know. So research. Okay, so research skills. So um, I would like to continue what Professor Cuevas mentioned. That I think that right now we are like in a crisis moment. We're starting to um, get some adaptations from artificial intelligence. So I think that that would be one of the key concepts, like to take into account from an ethical perspective. How can we make a better use artificial intelligence with teachers, like to make more time to do research? I think that if we do it in a right way, we take into account all the implications that it may have, so we can streamline data collection, for example, make it a little bit faster, and of course, taking into account the taboo that we have now, because there's also, as a teacher in bachelor level, there is a lot of anxiety about artificial intelligence, because some students are going to the university and they thinking, why is it that I need to study a bachelor's degree if in 10 years I'm going to be replaced by a machine, right? So, and that's something that we need to study to see what are those anxieties and those implications on mental health of pre-service teachers, right? But if we take into account that from a more constructive way, I think that we can use artificial intelligence to improve data collection, maybe analysis, maybe to make research faster, because as we have already mentioned before, probably, well, at the university levels, but of course at school levels, teachers have a lot of workload, no? And sometimes that's what research becomes, like a workload and it's something that you enjoy, you see? The people who enjoy research, as probably you, that you are here on a Saturday morning, you love research, so absolutely you love it. But some people do not, right? Some people have like, it's because they have to. So sometimes I think that if we change the dynamics, probably we can have more things. Um, Second, probably to participate in massive online courses. I think they because I have done it when I feel that I need to learn something. So I usually take it, probably in Coursera, in Future Learn, that you take into account those 2 3 week courses, so you get some skills in terms of research. So probably I would try to get teachers to get closer to those alternatives, no, that they are based on students' initiative. And finally, I would take into account, I think that we may all agree that collaborative learning is key. Now, in Colombia, we have these wonderful things that are called semilleros, that the hotbeds that you can see students who have barely knowledge about research and they are then next to you like your colleagues, right? And that's something that for me is wonderful to see the growth, and that is it's because of the initiative of teachers, professors, and students in creating something new, in changing and transforming education through these skills.
I I think, we're saying here, teachers need to see the value of research. And so, again, we have to frame it in terms of their context and the wonderings or problems or issues they face in their teaching as just sort of a basic thing. But I think my answer to this question is, it's on us. It's on us. We know teachers are overworked, they are underpaid, they don't get much for what we are trying to encourage here. And I think teachers might have the desire, but there's so many factors that are really barriers to them doing research. So then what's our role? What's our role in doing something about this? I think one of the things that matters are principals at schools if we're talking about in-service teachers. If you have a principal on board who sees the value of research, I think things change. So I think for us to have conversations with school leaders is really important in this. It's also, I think, interesting to think of cultivating teacher leaders in schools so that we can sort of maybe try to cultivate that research, but then also they can kind of take it up on their own if they have a leadership from the teacher corps that could do something with it. But again, this all would depend on having a principal who's going to support such an effort. I think taking advantage of technology, as you've described, Javier, is really important. And I think one of the things that I've heard yesterday and today is the importance of collaboration and how at the university level, there's a lot of a lack of collaboration at times to the point of not supporting other people. And I think if we can think more about really taking this idea of supportive collaboration within our institution and across institutions, something we might start thinking about, if this really matters to you, is getting a group of people together from different universities to really think about what a plan could be. Like, what would our goal be? And then what are steps we could take? Because we're not, a goal is an aspiration, but we need to take some small steps. And small steps is really all we can start with and take. So what would be small steps that we could take as this collaborative group to think about this question? So I think really we need to think together and really try to be creative in thinking about this, and really come up with a plan of action with something small, doable, perhaps researchable, and go from there. Finally, I wanted to say that it seems to me that there's research SIGs already in Asakopi, and I wonder if more could be done with that in terms of videos, maybe having people who specialize in certain kinds of research, like discourse analysis, create little talleres or, videos that like chunks of how to, and maybe at sort of different stages. And so again, I think if we want this to happen, a lot of this is on us. We need to make it happen. And also recognizing that we're overworked and underpaid. So I think doing something manageable is really important.
Thank you, Paula. I guess that I'll take some of your, or I concur with some of what you were presenting in leading and seeing, perhaps seeing before leading, the teacher of the present as an agent of change. Not that it wasn't before. We know that our role over history has been a prior one in society, but especially with all of the devices that we have discussed this morning, I visualize the role we have as teacher educators to empower teachers to be these leaders. So since my main argument is visualizing this teacher as an agent of change, I think that we can and have the responsibility, it's a big responsibility, those of us who are in teacher education roles, to help teachers to lead up initiatives in their institutions, which make them empowered and give them a voice in their communities. I guess this is one of the main things that over the morning we have heard, as the teacher is able to lead and endorse initiatives in the classroom and helping him or her be empowered of such change. I guess that's a vital role in our communities. Engaging in collaborative projects, engaging in study groups. I personally have tried, and with lots of good results, study groups work. I recap on what Paula was mentioning, finding the value in these small things that could start on, once a month, twice a month, and sustain these practices across time, and hopefully with the support of administratives and other scholars, I guess that teachers could also find the value. Again, it's a matter of identity and helping them evolve and recognize and be heard in the communities. Um, I guess that with all of the contextual challenges and opportunities, because not everything is as pessimistic as we are all in the world and we're going to die and everything is bad. No, I guess that there is also a myriad of possibilities in terms of what teachers and we ourselves as teacher educators have. Reading more, conveying all of these multimodal texts, integrating them. I really love your idea, Paula, and we should do that, especially with this time, with this group of scholars that we are here. We are always active in associations, always active in publishing. We should perhaps have a commitment for the next conference or so, and this is just an idea that just occurred my mind when Paula was mentioning, in creating, these SIGs or these study groups that we have always wanted to create, and sometimes even ourselves are relegated because we have also a big workload, right? But leading up these initiatives at the national level could prove effective, and our students who are our teachers in all schools, and we could also do something for them, leading them up, in visualizing and opening themselves up to the world. So we should definitely do something about that. Reading more, writing more, I guess, in my idea of study groups and helping them discover their powers, a lot of teachers could discover new talents in these study groups or in this teacher training, which is a little bit more focused, right? Perhaps we discover also talents and leaders that, could be these cells that is spread over our action, more engagement, more connections, and also more training. But I know that our last question would also lead us to threefold perspectives in terms of what we could be and what could we done with the help of other entities. So I would leave us there, just thinking that we really, again, need to concentrate on the teacher itself, or her or himself, not to be pejorative in my language. Because if we focus and we empower teachers as leaders, I guess that we could have marvels across our territories.
That we're running out of time. So as my role as a summarizer, so I want to build up on the idea of identity. So in response to how can teachers expand their research skills, and this comes from my teacher friend, from Martin. He said perhaps now might be for some teachers who are like overwork and have heavy administrative loads, might be a little bit late, but he said we should start from the very beginning. So cultivating this inquiry mindset from the very beginning, and building on what Javier Sierra said about semilleros, study groups. We have had it, and I think that even our research groups, I wonder how many classroom-based teachers or school teachers are in our research groups. So that would be one. And the second one also it's about what Professor Golombek said about partnerships. So it's important to talk to principals, to institutional leaders, and the government, secretarías de educación, all of that, so they can support and help us with incentivize this in teachers, because I think teachers need to be compensated because this is time and effort. So they should be compensated either in, perhaps lighter workloads, some prizes, and spaces for freedom. And creating those spaces, could spaces where and networks that could go in both ways, as sandboxes where teachers can read and experiment and play a little bit with the new ideas, such as AI or all those things, in places where they can also reflect about their needs, what is not working, how can they address those problems.
Okay, so I already been called for the time, so I guess there will not be enough for the fourth question. I just want to mention the key ideas that you have talked about in your answers. Uh, Definitely, we need more support in terms of research, more cooperation. Although we already cooperate among each other, we still need more cooperation. Think about the praxis-based research as one of the premises for connecting research and the practice. Participatory action research has been one of the approaches that you mentioned, as well as the exploratory practice and the incorporation of critical pedagogy in research. For the last part, we still need to show more the value of research for the ones who are just in education or just starting their career in this profession. More research leaders and more agents of change, researchers as agents of shares, or excuse me, agents of change. I really love the idea about knowledge ecosystem is something, this is just kind of that I was working on, of something that I've been working recently in one article that will be published in a while. Thank you very much, Liliana, Javier, Paula, Rosa, for being in this panel. Thank you, Profile, for the opportunity to share knowledge with the audience. And that's all for this panel. Thank you so much.
Now we are going to start with our fourth panel, which is called Writing for Publication, Challenges of Colombian Editors to Make Contributions of Teachers of English More Visible. This panel will be moderated by Professor Melba Livia Cárdenas. And, sorry, although she needs no introduction. She holds a PhD in education from Universidad de Zaragoza, Spain, an MA in TESOL from Edinburgh University in Scotland, and a BD in modern languages from Universidad de La Salle, Colombia. She is a professor at Universidad Nacional de Colombia, editor of Profile, and a co-researcher in Profile and Lexi groups. Professor Melba Livia will introduce the panelists for this session.
Thank you, Lorena, and it is a real pleasure to be part of this panel, sharing with dear colleagues who are here with us at this place, and also online, to colleagues who are also willing to share experiences and thoughts with us today. Let me introduce my colleagues. Jimena Bonilla is a doctor in education. She's a full-time professor at Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas University, where she is the editor of the Colombian Applied Linguistics Journal. She's currently the coordinator of the Master in Applied Linguistics to the Teaching of English. And then we have Edgar Lucero, who helped us with the previous panel, a full-time teacher educator in the Education Sciences faculty at Universidad de La Salle, mi alma mater as well. He is the editor of How Journal, which is published by the Colombian Association of Teachers of English, ASOCOPI. He holds a PhD in education with an emphasis in ELT and MA in Applied Linguistics from Universidad Distrital. And he has also specialization degree in didactics of languages and a BA in Spanish, English, and French. And he is interested in the areas of classroom interaction, language teaching didactics, and teaching practicum. And on my left, we have Terney Cruz, who is a language teacher, educator, and researcher. His research interests center on bilingual education, language policy, teacher identity, rural education, and the relations of all these elements with social justice issues. I should highlight that his work, together with Jimena's work has been very important in calling teachers' attention to rural education in particular, which is something that is very much needed in our country. And of course, many of us have done this, but not as much as you have. And this is something that I really want to highlight and to encourage from our journals. And Ferney is currently an assistant professor at the School of Humanities at Universidad Pedagógica Nacional, where he collaborates in the edition of Folio's journal. And online, we have Berta. Very nice to see you online. Thank you, Berta. Berta Ramos is a professor at Universidad Pedagógica and Tecnológica de Colombia in Tunja, Boyacá. She holds a PhD in Educational Sciences from the same university and an MA in Applied Linguistics for the teaching of English from Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas. She currently teaches at the School of Languages at UPTC and is the editor of Enlitawa Journal. And last but not least, I also want to welcome Pilar Osorio. Thank you for accepting the invitation as well, Pilar. She holds a PhD. She's a researcher with over 16 years of experience in Latin American literature and culture. She is the director of publications and editor of GIST journal at UNICA, Universidad Única. Her research focuses on the history of emotions in Latin American literature, particularly how child narrators define justice. So as you can see, our panelists are very committed to making teachers and novice teacher researchers, educators in general, works visible. And let us begin with the challenges, right? Because nowadays, we are expected to get our work published, yes? Though that's not a priority, yes? And we have heard about the relevance of doing research, innovating, changing, examining our practices, but not necessarily with the idea of getting published. However, we know that when you engage in the writing process, we face challenges. So the first question is, what challenges do teachers face when writing in English for international publications? Not necessarily from our experience as writers, teachers and writers, but as editors. So I would like to give the floor to our to Pilar and Berta first, and then we can just carry on with you, right? So Berta, would you like to start?
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for this invitation and happy anniversary profile. Congratulations and thank you very much for being part of the academic life of many of us. Before answering the question, I know I just have some minutes, I understand that. I would like to tell you a personal anecdote. I wrote my first article in Profile, and I still remember Professor Valivia telling me, go on, and she was all the time supporting my partner to publish. So thank you. Well, my answers for the panel are based then on my lived experiences as writer and of course as the editor of El Netawa Journal. And well, El Netawa Journal is a publication that for more than 15 years has tried to be the first written space for novice authors. So what we have tried to do with El Netawa Journal is to help novice writers to understand all the publication process, such as, for example, the evaluation, the proofreading, the editing, and the post-publication part. So we are very proud because many of our novices have already written in Profile, HOW, ICA, Lagist, Colombian Applied Linguistics, Folios, and also in international publications. So we can say we have fulfilled our objective. Just to tell you that now we have Ana Peñalosa, who is a former student of our program, and she wrote her first article with El Netawa. Now he's a PhD student in education at the University of Davis, and she founded the Hermanas Escritoras Project, a Chicana Latina undergraduate students-led group at that university, and that was thanks to what she lived as a writer in our publications. So I'm very proud of what she's doing now. So to answer this first question, Professor Belvaliga, I would like to start by mentioning that usually authors feel afraid of sharing their knowledge with others, even here in Colombia. So I think that it is the same when they want to publish abroad. They're afraid of being criticized just because of what they do. They think their knowledge is not good enough. That's what I have lived, I have faced with the authors that publish in El Etagua. From a more like instructional perspective, let's say, I would like to tell you that a year ago, the editorial publishing at UPTC, so it means the editorial UPTC started a research project sponsored by Conciencias about open science publications. And one of the objectives of the project was to analyze how the journals at our university have evolved and how they could continue improving their quality and then have free access. Something that was found was that the scope of our journals at our university as compared with journals from countries such as Brazil, United States, Spain, and many others, were very broad. So our scopes, for example, we have one of the scopes of our journal is pedagogy. So it is extremely broad. So another challenge that teachers face trying to write in English for international publications is that sometimes they don't really recognize easily the scope of the publication. So they may, for example, have a pedagogical intervention related to multimodality, and then they send their publication to a journal which is multimodality and society, or multimodality and communication. And maybe that's not the specific scope for the teaching approach that they have for multimodality. So I think that's a very big challenge that I have faced. So thank you very much, and I give the floor to Professor.
Thank you, Berta. Now, Pilar, please.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for this invitation and this opportunity to go talk about this amazing topic. I guess one of the biggest challenges that I have faced and seen is who are our readers? Who are we writing for? Because I face as an editor that sometimes authors bring in like from Ethiopia and like I don't know, Turkey is a really common published country in our journal, and they have like a specific way of approaching to English. And then I have to send those articles to native speakers. And sometimes this idea of what is the perfect English and communicability and who are our readers and how we approach to English from a peripheric perspective is like the biggest issue for me as an editor, is like the biggest challenge, is how to address this being non-native and wanting to create a global south of readers and academics that where identities and different identities can be seen and shouldn't be like denied but should be addressed. And how to I guess I don't know if I'm rambling, but like my biggest concern sometimes is how to solve this issue between authors and reviewers and readers. Like that reach is the hardest and the most challenging part for me, of how to address coloniality and post-coloniality and decoloniality in these relationships. I don't know if I'm being clear. I hope.
Indeed. Thank you. Now, we would like to continue with these challenges that I'm sure that perhaps we will see overlap between challenges that we face when writing for publication and the experience that we see in novice writers and also experienced writers, yes? I think that some of these aspects overlap. So I would like to give the floor to Jimena, then Edgar and Ferney.
Okay, well, I'm gonna start with the first question in terms of how I see are the challenges from the editor's position, and how the people see English as a way, as a barrier to express their ideas. And sometimes I'm sad to see that there is a good production in Spanish of other areas, and that they have brilliant ideas that they don't feel, well, they have the tools to publish in English, so they cannot access this space. In the Colombian Applied Linguistics Journal, we have identified that, and that's why we have also thought of including production in Spanish. So we don't limit this production that is very rich in our context, in the local context, and we can also get, well, this understanding and this contribution to the field. In terms of the people who dare to send their production to the journal, we also see that sometimes English is, well, I'm focusing on the language as such. So I'm saying that sometimes they feel that English is very important. And there are articles in which the production is very focused on having a good English development. And we don't see a lot of content in the articles. So that's another challenge, because even though we have a journal that is published in English, the most important is what is said and not the way it is said. And that's some of the criteria we use in order to select the articles. And there are frustrations sometimes in terms of how we understand the value of the publications, if it is really in the language on what is said. I would say that, let me remember a little bit. Also, as a local journal, but also written in English, sometimes we feel that there is a matter of prestige in terms of how people value the publication. And they, even though the journal is a traditional journal, it has constructed a trajectory. And many people send their publication to the journal because of this. Some others prefer other type of journals because they feel that they are more international, and because they are well, they have like a window in other spaces. And we feel that sometimes we don't share important experience and knowledge that people produce because of these ideas of the ideology of where English is positioned and the spaces where it can have an impact. So, well, that's in terms of language, the most important points. How we see that as editors, as writer also, I would say that we see that sometimes international journals that are in other places out of Colombia, because our journals are international too, they are they have parameters in which they don't consider a lot the production from other places. So there are several European journals, for example, that they have criteria to value the articles, including knowledge that is in Europe. And sometimes we are not producing, like, that's not the purpose of the article. The purpose is actually localizing, situating other knowledge, other type of knowledge, and usually the knowledge that is not seen other places in the world, but they don't accept the articles because they don't feel that it's connected to the context. So I think this is also a barrier that is beyond the language, that is in terms of how these the criteria the journals select to set themselves as international journals. And well, we see in now going to the novice and the expert writers, we see that well, it's actually difficult to identify who are the novice and the expert writers that are sending articles to the journal, well, once they are there. But we have seen that probably from novice teachers, we are very careful about the guidelines of the journal, what to write, what to consider. And sometimes this is in the experts, sometimes they develop like a general construction of how the journals develop ideas, and they don't care a lot in the specificities of the journal. And we find that we have to like have a process of follow-up with novice and expert teachers in order to make them understand that we have an identity as a journal, and this identity is the most valuable thing to develop the journal, and not to have frustrations also, because sometimes people send articles, and I think that happens more in novice writers, that they send articles without looking at the specificity of the journal, and then we try not to say this is rejected, but to say you can submit it somewhere else, which is a way to do it pedagogically. But anyway, there are frustrations, and that those are also challenges.
Thank you. Good morning again. Thank you for this invitation. I'm honored to share the panel with all of you, with Berta and Pilar as well. I really agree with this idea that our journals are to show the type of knowledge we are producing and how that knowledge can go around the world, and how other people, other teachers of the community can read what is going on in Colombia. Also in our journals, we have authors, international authors, who see our journals as the window to show their ideas all around. I want to focus for the answer more on the structure as the first factor. I guess that one of the challenges is following that article structure that has been pre-established by the so-called international high quality or most cited, recognized with the highest age index, etc., around the world, that they have like 5, 6 particular steps with an intro, theoretical framework or theoretical foundation. Then they have research, the research design, then the results, conclusions, references, and annexes. That is like the common structure. And seems to be that all the journals seems to attach to that specific structure. And I guess in our context and in other contexts as well, that structure is so like frame people into one way of thinking that does not exactly resemble the way we can just have our knowledge shared. And that is one of the challenges that we have. Sometimes, I guess that in all of our journals, we receive articles with excellent ideas that are organized in a different way and also have a lot of value, as Jimena has already said. But as we need to follow that structure, it becomes a challenge because we need to reorganize all the knowledge that we have into that particular structure. It's time for us to start seeing other ways of sharing the ideas than not following that pre-established structure. And the structure is not only on the parts of the article, but also within each of the sections of the article, there seems to be an inner structure as well. Let's see the methodological framework. It needs to start with the type of research or the design of research, and it goes with the participants, and it goes with the instruments and techniques, then it goes with data analysis, like the procedures and data analysis. And that is a microstructure within that framework, and that is also another way, or another challenge that we have organized in our knowledge in that way, if it is not exactly the way that we follow in our study. Many may think that if it is not the way you organize research, you did not do research. And I guess that that's not the case. We do research in very valuable ways that do not exactly follow that pre-established structure. So in that microstructure, as Jimena said, and Berta also mentioned, there is an academic style that we need to follow as well. So there is one particular way of using the language, as Jimena was saying, that resembles the way of how knowledge should be displayed around the world. But I ask myself and for all the audience, don't we have another way just to share our knowledge and present our ideas that needs to follow that specific guideline for academic style? For example, we revised the APA style website, And there are specific norms for the academic style in articles. Seems to be that we need to learn that way of thinking, and in that way of thinking, we need to present our own thoughts. Believe it or not, although our community has struggled a lot about it, the origin and the topic is another challenge. Trying to publish in international journals, I'm seeing journals that are outside Colombia, because I do agree with the idea that our journals are also international. When there is an article received from one country, that I say, where is that country actually? And they say, who are they? Who are those ones? Who are the authors trying to publish the ideas in our article? Sorry, possibly that's not exactly the attitude that they have, but possibly that's the way we receive when we send an article to those journals, and immediately we receive no. And we do not know the reason. Yeah, it simply say your article was not accepted by the editorial committee. At least, I guess, it's our right to receive the reason of why our article was not accepted. But we do not even receive that. So the reading that I have is that possibly the origin, where the country comes from or where the authors are from, is an issue, and it becomes a challenge for us. Something that I experienced as well when I was trying to publish one of articles in one North American journal. The topic is also another challenge. I guess that here we are producing knowledge in very relevant topics. I can mention one, just my friend Adriana publishes and works on knowledge, teacher's knowledge. And I imagine just trying to send a type of journal with that knowledge that is produced, the teachers in Colombia have, to one journal, let's say Taylor and Francis support the journal. And so I'd say, okay, what is that topic about? Yeah, what are they trying to say? Or when we use instruments as, I don't know, I remember testimonials. They say, testimonials, what is that about? Yeah, no, that's not a topic relevant for the whole community, they may think, okay? Our journals should also work in a line that goes against that perspective, that there is a specific set of premises to follow or conditions to follow when we are about to publish. And we can just share knowledge in other ways. That's my answer for.
All right. Good morning, and thank you for the invitation too. I'm very, very happy to be here talking to you and sharing this panel with my colleagues and representing Pedagogical University here with their journal folios. I have to say I'm quite new to the process of editing. I have been collaborating, and probably that's the best description to this, collaborating to the edition of this journal. We have the main editor who is Professor Angela Camargo, thank you. But this is a multidisciplinary journal. So we have articles that deal with philosophy, history, language learning, literature. So I collaborate with the area of language, more particularly with those articles that come related to English language teaching. So it's like having many journals in one. So most of the things I'm gonna say probably are more about my experience as a writer rather than as editing. However, I might share some of those observations that I have had when reviewing the articles that come to the journal. Well, my colleagues have already said many things. Now I understand Rosa when she said we are the summarizers, yeah, the last person. But I think that in addition to what is being said, and more in also trying to connect this with a conversation we had yesterday with Professor Carmen Elena, I think that one of the challenges is to find inspiration. Yeah. So to inspire teachers to really write and to probably not see that writing, the academic world is not my world. My world is like the classroom. And then they see that there is like a like a wall separating them from the academic world. So they need to find the inspiration to probably break down that wall and move on into the worlds. In the previous panel, the panelists were talking about the connection between research and teaching, and so this connection, seeing, understanding, teaching, and research together, is a way in which we can see, okay, I'm doing important things. I need to believe that what I'm doing is worth sharing. That's part of being inspired and taking the step to write. So I would say that I had something to say about the writing styles, and I'm gonna leave it there. So trust the work more, like trusting that what we are doing is worth sharing. Even if we hear things like, that's not something to be published here, so we try somewhere else. As a writer, I have been told the same things, like, why don't you publish that article in a more regional journal, not here, another North American journal, yeah. Publish it in a more regional. And I said, well, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna really, and then, but also another journal of prestige. Our journals here are also very important, and I think we are more flexible in terms of the structure. Another experience, I sent another paper to another international journal, more thinking of like the structure that we have here. And then they said, where is how exactly, you are not explaining, or you are not having all the structure that a scientific journal should have, like the results, discussion part, then the methodology has to be very well described, like, because we need to see how you validated the data, the results, etc. And that was not the spirit of it. So I'm saying this because the other challenge that I think is we need to face is perseverance. We need to persevere. Like, we try it, maybe we're going to be rejected sometimes. We're going to be told no. We're going to be told to do major changes. So persevere, because we might say, okay, I'm done with writing. I'm going to try it anymore. I'm going to stick to doing things in my class.
Thank you for the reflections and the experiences you have shared with us. And I was, I mean, from the very beginning, I could see that you were like embracing challenges that are faced when writing in English for international publication, and also experiences that come from novice writers, yes, to respond to the requirements of evaluation. So thank you for like linking those to those aspects. And I think that it is just fantastic to see how we, even though we work in at different places, we share common experiences and we face the same challenges. And I would like to highlight the relevance of this awareness that editors and reviewers, as you have been saying, the importance of being aware of the writer's profile. And this is something that we do as mediators in the process. And also the idea that you, and I think that you highlighted this in the previous panel. I think that Paula mentioned this, she stressed that, and it's like the agenda that you have as a teacher is relevant because that's significant for you. And you have highlighted the importance of trusting what you have been doing, yes, and trying to not to give up. Now we would like to move on onto the challenges that we have, perhaps to expand a little bit on the challenges we face to publish when we publish a peripheral journal in English, particularly, okay, we compete with strong, prestige, traditional journals and wealthy, and then even, and this is something that we experience, you meet gurus, yes, when you attend conferences and they say, oh, and it's in English, right? And it's produced in Colombia. yes, and I would say, yes, we do that. And I would like to invite you to be part of the editor, or to help us, whatever, because this is not common, right? So let's talk a little bit about those challenges, yes, that we face too. Uh, some of you have mentioned these aspects, but let's expand a little bit on that. Can we start with Edgar? Let's say 2 minutes each so that we can.
Okay. Hear me? Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. I will be now the first. There could be two positions for the challenges. One, we go for the frustration, or second, we go for the challenge. If we go for the frustration, we give up easily. Okay. But we go for the second, the challenge is this enthusiasm that we have for demonstrating and showing that we also produce knowledge, and we are not exactly that peripheral as we have been called. We also can discuss issues of the center of the knowledge, and we can also show other angles how the knowledge can go to. We can also, let me see, I have here, we can also challenge the profiling that the center has created in knowledge, and we can also expand knowledge that possibly the center has not considered because they have been just grouped just in that specific zone, and we can advance knowledge from other angles. I guess that's possibly the challenge that we have. And by doing so, we can show that there are other ways of thinking the education. So I would be just go until that point.
Okay. Yeah, as you said, I was mentioning a little bit about that in terms of how we see our journal in the international sphere. And we have felt that the Colombian Applied Linguistics Journal has this impact in the international sphere, because we have invited some of the writers to present their articles in the launch of our journal. And we have seen the people from other countries that have participated, they say like, we think the journal is very prestigious, and it has a lot of important contributions to the knowledge. So we feel that people who are participating in the journal really feel these contributions of the journal. As a challenge, I would say that because we are in the Colombian context writing in English, I was mentioning before, sometimes we would like to capture all the knowledge that people could produce, and that they cannot produce it because they don't use the language or they don't speak the language. So that's why we are increasing our publications in Spanish too. So we can capture both, the ones who can speak English and the ones who can speak Spanish, and that we can also spread this knowledge that is being developed by teachers. And I would also say that we need to believe in sometimes, probably these people who have said that the journal is very prestigious are not people from Colombia. And it's probably because sometimes we don't believe in what we have. And we need to believe that we have great things, and we have produced a lot of things that are recognized somewhere else, and that we can take advantage of those spaces just to be in the international sphere. I would say that.
Thank you. Now I would like to invite Berta and Pilar to share with us, okay, your views regarding these challenges that we have faced, and in particular, but because we have, I would say, like in a way, like tradition in Colombia in terms of the classification of our journals, and then over the past few years, we have witnessed that it's not only certain journals in linguistics only, or literature, but applied linguistics, English language teaching, bilingual journals have become very powerful. Yes, and journals like El Etagua thinking about possibilities for novice teacher researchers as well. Please carry on. Okay, Pilar, I would like to give the floor to Pilar and then Berta. So the floor is yours.
Thanks. Okay, I would like to build up on Edgar's intervention and ideas. I was thinking, like, you were talking about like these options between frustrations and challenges. And I was thinking about like, why do we do what do we do? Like, what is the purpose of publishing and writing and doing this conference in English? Is like, we all speak Spanish. Why are we not talking in Spanish? And I was guessing that perhaps our idea is to make accessible what is done here in the region and to strengthen like the global south, like that we can talk among us and other countries, that we are not in the center but in the peripheries. And that took me to another place that we, in the discussion that was before about this idea of the structure. You were saying like perhaps we could like challenge the structure and propose a new one. But we are using English as a lingua franca, perhaps that structure is as well a lingua franca that we need in order to ensure that we're all understanding each other. And I guess then my challenge is going into how to communicate among like peripheral communities, how to publish in peripheral communities without those lingua franca structures and breaking them, but also making us visible in the global view. I guess those are my thoughts on the topic.
Berta?
Okay, thank you. I would like to answer this question, considering the fact that at the Letaba we publish in different languages, not only mostly in English, but we also publish some articles in French, in German, and now we are going to have a new version, a new part of the journal, which is going to be in Spanish and Guarani. So I think that one of the biggest challenges we have had is to receive support for our publication, because all the publications, all of you are part of Publindex, Scopus, but we are not, because we see ourselves as a project in which we want novice teachers and researchers to start recognizing how important their knowledges are. And then for our institution, sometimes it is very hard to understand that what we want to do is to help, is to serve as a space in which writers can feel welcome, so that later on they start like their process in some other publications. So that's the most difficult part. You cannot even imagine how hard it has been. For example, this year we are going to have a special publication for 15 students who are currently at the university pursuing their MA in language teaching. And we told them to publish with us this special issue of El Tawa Journal. And well, we went to all this process of convincing them, because they thought their knowledge was good enough, because they were only teachers, that was what they said. And then we told the university that we were going to have this special issue, and the university immediately told us, so you're going to have from Paraguay publishing, but you know that Paraguay is a very small country, so to what extent they are going to help us, like to receive more citations if they don't even have their own publications, etc., etc., etc. So I think that at least in our case, the most difficult part has always been the lack of support, because we see it as a project. It's a publication of El Letaba Journal.
Thank you for your thoughts as well, and I would like to invite Renee to wrap up this aspect, right? So the summarizer.
Well, actually, I'm going to talk about three specific things about folios and what we find challenging there. As I said, it is a multidisciplinary journal, also multilingual. This journal published in English, in Spanish, in Portuguese. So we welcome also articles in Portuguese and French. So one of the most difficult things is to balance. Like every time we're going to publish an issue, like how many papers do we have in English? How many papers do we have in Spanish? What are the topics we are going to publish? We cannot publish too many in English or too many about language teaching, but we need to balance the topics. And sometimes we are lucky enough to have plenty to choose from, but sometimes we don't. So that has been a bit of a challenge I have observed. Another one is the quality and also the themes. Like, what are the sometimes, as Jimena mentioned earlier, I have reviewed articles with very, very interesting ideas. But then we said, does it have the quality in terms of the writing conventions and all that? So what can we do in order to help this author like rewrite it? And then we were talking with Professor Angela, and he said, "Well, we cannot really offer like this individual follow-up. We just need to give him, say, not this time. You are welcome to send it again and pay attention to this and this, the reasons why we think you should do things. But it is not really like we think that sometimes they need more personal guidance, especially the beginner teachers. And with all those topics that we have in folios, then it makes it difficult. Yeah, I said those things: the quality, the follow-up, and the balance.
Thank you. And as you have noticed, time is up, but I feel tempted just to close this panel with the challenges we face nowadays with an increasing digital environment. Now, we used to publish our journals, okay, printed journals. We used to publish printed journals. Then we have the hybrid versions, and now we are moving to just digital versions. So what kind of challenges would you highlight, okay, in connection to this tendency? On what kind of views and perhaps alternatives have you considered in your journals, having in mind the situation we face, in not only in Colombia, but in places where our articles are read? So can we start with Berta, then Pilar, and then the ones who are here, and then Ferney, because he doesn't want to summarize, right? You just be attentive because you don't know who is going to be last, okay? The last one, right? So Edgar and Jimena, that's part of classroom management. Yes, we haven't forgotten that, right? So let us begin with Pilar and Olga. And Berta, sorry. And challenges in nowadays with this digital publication.
Pilar, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I must confess that it's hard for me to identify challenges. I just see opportunities. I guess the biggest problem for me is like the remote areas in Colombia and in Latin America, that with accessibility issues, they can't access our journals, although we have like a specific kind of readers that perhaps if they want to read us and they want to know about us, they have some kind of connection to internet. But I guess it's hard for me to think about challenges. I just see a lot, an insane amount of opportunities.
Well, in my case, well, I do agree with Pilar in the sense that there are opportunities. However, something that we have seen here is that some of our authors and our readers are not familiarized with the digital environments. So we receive every single day researchers and telling us if they can have a printed version of the journal, for example, because they prefer to read the journal printed. Another challenge is that the digital environments are just for some people. For example, in Boyacá, which is the place where I work, in this department, there are still many territories without access to internet. So it seems to be that we are publishing a journal just for some people. In terms of the, and one way or another, we are not giving the opportunity to those people, for example, in the rural areas, to see what we produce and to see if how they can also be part of the authors that we have. In terms of the technological issues, I am not an expert on this, but I know that there are many things that might affect the quality of the publication. I don't know if that happens in private universities, but what I have seen in public universities is that sometimes change, like those people or those places that support us with their technological devices, and then everything migrates and everything changes, and that has been a big issue for us, for example, and also the fact that maybe we need to continue working with those technological environments so that we can help people with different conditions to read what we publish. I'm talking about, for example, those people with certain limitations, let's say. So I think that there is still a lot of challenges, although it seems to be a very good option, but I don't know to what extent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Berta. And of course, because you have also worked on this topic, okay, working with materials and thinking about how to engage teachers, and you've worked with school teachers in rural areas, something that we really need to highlight, right? Now, Fernand.
Sure. Well, briefly, I think that one of the biggest challenges is to keep up with other journals. Yeah, some other journals are really fast and they are publishing all year round, and they, as soon as they have an article, they publish it online. But at Folios we cannot do that because that implies further funding that we don't have. So it is, we are a big journal, but with little money, and also not many people involved. So we find it challenging to keep up with other journal and the ways in which other journals are managed, and probably the funding that they have. And at the same time, another important challenge is the relevance of the topics that we are publishing, because then we find that around the world there are many publications about topics, and maybe the time we are able to publish something is already not as timely as 1 year before when the article was actually sent. So we want to be we want to publish relevant things. Uh, I'm just wondering if we are really doing it, because the whole process takes more than a year sometimes. So for folios, maybe in other journals it could be easier. I would highlight those two.
Okay. Well, in terms of this digital stage in which we are, I think I see opportunities, indeed, but because we have been able to understand other ways of producing these articles, and also spreading this knowledge in different parts of the world. When it was printed, it was limited to the area, closed area. Now we can span it several parts of the world, and that's advantage. However, well, some of these problems have to do with the lack of infrastructure we have, and more in public universities where we have resources are limited. And we have a team or helping us with the journal, but this team has a lot of work because two or four more no more than four people are helping all the journals in at the university that are produced at the university. So they are really busy helping with the editing and the process of organizing the whole journal, and that's a limitation in the infrastructure, and more when we need technology, because we don't have the money to get, well, big computers with a lot of advanced technology. And that's putting us a little bit behind, and those ideas that Fernay was explaining before are probably because of that, because we don't have enough money to compete with the people who have the money to just inject this, the last technology, so we can include it now. We have to do it slowly with our own resources. That's a challenge. And also, I think it opens opportunities, but at the same time, is a challenge for us, the editors. We need to know a lot of things now. And I think every time we are talking about how we can increase what we are, or improve what we are doing, is including a lot of technology, and we don't have the skills, we don't have the knowledge, and it's like putting us pressure in terms of I need to know that, and then we get help from our assistants and the people around, and they talk about computer languages that we don't understand. And this format HTML, all this codification in the articles just to make them visible is really difficult for us to understand. And we have seen also that in the academic community of editorial editings and editing journals, there is a lot of conversation about that. And sometimes we feel illiterate in terms of how to speak about this language of technology and how to produce like journals, putting them in the first place with the H1 and H4, and there are formulas that we feel sometimes overwhelmed because we don't know how to deal with them. We know that we are trying to get quality work, but working and mediating with this negotiation of computing languages is really difficult and challenging for us.
Okay, so please allow me two parts. First, summarizing, and then my answer. So the summary, my dear colleagues have talked about remote areas access, being familiar with the field of publishing, mostly for the community, the reading traditions that we may have in our country, keeping up with other journals. There are some that just issue numbers easily and quickly. The topic relevance, other ways of producing the issues or the numbers, not just the digital way, but there could be other ones as printing or how if there are other ones. And Jimena was talking about infrastructure and resources. My answer was born in an invitation for lunch. And we were talking about language, and we were talking about technology. Nowadays, there is commodification of language thinking and learning as a product. Seems to be that the more English is produced for learning, like more platforms, websites, apps are produced for learning English and teaching English, the better the digital world. And it turns language teaching and learning into a commodification. There are undergraduate programs, master programs that are looking for being more virtual than have face-to-face classes or being in situ. And that is one issue that we need to contemplate in our journals as well, how the knowledge will be just spread. That creates quick and tangible quantifier results for English. So the faster I learn seems to be the better. Our articles usually have 15, 20 pages, and new generations, the new generations for the academy, they are not so much prompt to read all those pages. Sometimes I just um, like laugh with my students. I laugh with my students that they read the title and the abstract, and they are already tired, and they don't want to read the others. And if they are using artificial intelligence, they just use the AI just to summarize the article. I remember my dear friend telling me that they can do it and they have like 5, 6 key ideas of the article, and that's enough for them. So that's the way possibly the new generations are seeing our articles. So we don't know. We need to approach that into our journals. So there's to be, on my point of view, overstimulation of digital tasks, and they are fully connected to the mobiles. I'm so surprised that here, because our generation is like that, we are not in that way. So we have our mobiles in hands, but we are not just scrolling up and down just to see many other things that, just in my view, I do not know how relevant they are for their lives, what they are watching, but they are not seeing things about education. So my question is like this, just to finish my intervention. So the academy is evolving with all those practices. So how journals are going to approach to that? Who will receive our scholarship? New generations, and we are so worried about publishing excellent ideas, great ideas with the structures or no structures, or just going against all those structures and creating our own way of portraying our knowledge. But who will read it? And how they are going to read that knowledge. Our articles will continue being that long. There will be another way just to write so that we captivate the new generation's point of view. Who will receive that knowledge, how, and what for? I do not know how much they are. Sorry if I sound so pessimistic in this time, but I don't know. Yeah, I do not know if they are so interested as possibly our generations were when we were studying our master's and doctoral degrees. New generations. I'm a teacher in undergraduate programs in one, and sometimes I help in masters. And I do not see they so connected to the way our academy used to be, or the way we perceive our academy. I guess that we need to account for that and see other ways of sharing our knowledge in our journals. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the pessimistic conclusion, right? We're just going up and then suddenly, thank you. But that's a reality. And now we started with this because we are celebrating 25 years. And then I was thinking, what about the future of our journal? But I think that still, I would like to highlight the relevance of, mentoring those people who still, even though we are facing those challenges, supporting people who are trying to do that. And I think that mentoring plays a key role. And all of us have mentioned this, okay? Berta, Pilar, and all of us here, of you, we have already mentioned this idea of accompanying people who want to get published. This is a specific aspect that I would like to highlight here. And again, I insist on the importance of editors as mediators to be aware of writers' profiles, which is something that we don't find most of the time. And I think, and if you have like certain reviewers' profiles in mind as well, those who are more willing to give more detailed feedback and maybe to give second chances, that's okay, because we are creating communities with our journals. I mean, all of us agree on the fact that we didn't create and we don't work on support journals with the idea of just getting classifications, but with the idea of creating, supporting, and maintaining communities and making sure that you mention first steps in publication. Yes, to help people give those first steps. And yes, understanding that we have local agendas that interact, that establish dialogue with global agendas. We don't publish just for the sake of going local, but also thinking about dialogues with what is going on in other places. So I really want to thank you all for your contributions and for the and for your remarks at the end, Edgar, because I'm sure that all of us have commented on these changes in these generations, new generations of students and future teachers. And perhaps it's because in the past, in our generation, we relied too much on extra time that students and future teachers would devote to reading the articles. And my experience in the last 2 semesters with my students in the classroom research seminar has been connected to what you have just said, is that instead of relying on extra time, using the articles in class to make them explore particular aspects and to see the value, okay? Because even though, as you said, they are long articles, like say 12 pages, 15 pages, if they see the value in class, okay, so perhaps we are generating this interest, right? Not necessarily as extra load, right? And something that we always defend is that we need to make teachers, new generations, consumers of our knowledge as well. Not necessarily, not only Brown's manuals, yes, and Jeremy Harmer's manuals, they are useful, but we also have experiences that come from classroom research, practitioners, etc., right? So once more, okay, let us carry on, don't give up. We persevere as you have highlighted. Thank you. And we have a little something for you, Fernay, because you are, yes, because Jimena and for Jimena as well. Thank you. Not for Edgar, because he got one before in the previous panel. Thank you so much. Thank you, Berta. Thank you, Pilar, for your contributions. And we look forward to celebrating more years of publication of our Colombian journal.